Resident Evil has been around for 30 years. We've had masterpieces. We've had experiments. But every once in a while, a game drops that reminds you why this franchise refuses to die. Hello there, my Blood Moon pack. Let's talk about Resident Evil Requiem, a game that keeps you on the edge of your seat and completely absorbs you. It didn't feel like something I was in control of. It felt like something I was experiencing. And honestly, it was nothing short of amazing. But for now, let's take a look. Now, let's get this out of the way early. This is a spoiler-free review. I'm showing only general gameplay footage or trailers. No major encounters, no key story beats. If you're thinking about picking this game up, you can watch comfortably. Now, welcome to a world of horror and nightmares that began with a pharmaceutical company that is not what it seems, where every corporate experiment inevitably turns into a flesh-eating catastrophe. Resident Evil first appeared in Japan in 1996, defining survival horror for generations. And 30 years later, when most franchises would start playing it safe, Resident Evil is still finding ways to raise the stakes, leaving us wanting more. It's had its low points, but most certainly its high points as well. This game never once broke my immersion. Not through bugs, not through awkward pacing, not through clunky mechanics. With the release of Requiem, it is genuinely one of the smoothest launch experiences I've had in years. No crashes, no performance hiccups, no weird glitches pulling me out of the moment. For a brand new release in 2026, that's pretty impressive. And it shows a level of care that this franchise deserves. I was hooked from beginning to end, with about 12 hours of playtime to complete. There wasn't a single moment where I felt pulled out of it. And yes, it is just genuinely fun to play. The perspective shift between Grace and Leon made it feel like two games in one, and that's kinda genius. I know Resident Evil has done this before, but this felt different. Each of these perspectives had its own mechanics, which brought a whole new feel to this Resident Evil game that hadn't been in other RE games. Although they added different mechanics to each of the characters we got to play, it still felt like an RE game, just more refined. The mechanics of this game were great. Everything felt really well thought out and polished. No jank or weird glitches. Combat felt good and made me feel like I was fighting the zombies. Movement felt real and intentional. There was no, wait, why the heck did that just happen? Moments. The way Leon ran, the way Grace walked more cautiously and more afraid in some moments. I didn't have to press buttons too many times before it would register or be at that perfect angle to interact with something. I'm sure you guys know what I mean. Now, the only thing I occasionally struggled with was figuring out where to go next. The game does leave clues, notes, environmental hints, and subtle guidance, but there were a few moments where I found myself wandering longer than I probably needed to. I don't blame that entirely on the game. I do have a terrible sense of direction in real life, so that definitely carries over. But there were some times when the path forward wasn't immediately clear, and that slowed the momentum just a little bit.
6 now. 6 survivors of Raccoon City, all dead from the same thing.
Yeah, that's not good.
No, it's not.
Let's go over some of the performance in this game. I was only able to play on release day on PC, but overall, it was pretty rock solid. And it does make you wonder, when Capcom sticks to what this engine was clearly designed for, everything just works. No chaos, no scrambling, just a polished confidence release. Imagine that. In 2026, a game being released that's this smooth, no frame drops, no visual glitches, no hard crashes. It's very rare nowadays. I know some players have mentioned minor audio bugs, but throughout my entire playthrough, I personally didn't run into any issues. With this release, I also tested the game across a few different hardware setups to see how it handled performance. And I pushed it pretty hard. I wanted to see where the ceiling was. Even on a 4090, running an ultra-wide at 7680 by 2160 with ray tracing enabled, I was still comfortably sitting around 80 frames per second. And that's genuinely impressive. That kind of headroom gives me a lot of confidence that lower-end systems should be able to run this comfortably as well, especially with the available performance settings. With performance this strong, it really lets the graphical fidelity shine. Most of the environments are smaller, more contained spaces. And instead of being limited, that works in the game's favor. The team clearly paid attention to the fine details in every room, every hallway, and every corner. It's that focus on the small things: lighting, texture work, environmental clutter. That attention to detail that makes the world feel lived in instead of staged. And even though RE Engine has been around for a while now, it's clear Capcom truly understands how to get the most out of it. You can feel that experience in both the gameplay and the visuals. It shows in the gameplay, and it's definitely visible. The detail is there, but it never comes at the cost of performance. It just feels balanced. Requiem centers around two very different characters, Grace and Leon. Grace is new to this kind of horror. She's cautious, analytical. You can feel the weight of everything happening around her. There's hesitation in how she moves, how she reacts. That vulnerability isn't just a mechanic, it's part of who she is. And that choice shapes the entire experience. Because when the perspective shifts to Leon, everything changes. Leon's a veteran. He's seen it all. He walks into chaos like it's routine. There's confidence, experience, and throwing out his normal Leon one-liners.
I think I want a second opinion.
Even when everything is falling apart, he feels in control. That contrast is what drives this game. Grace makes you feel small, uncertain. Every corner feels like a risk. Then it flips to Leon and suddenly you feel capable. The action ramps up, the pressure releases just enough before the game pulls you back into that fear again. It doesn't feel like two disconnected campaigns. It feels intentional. Like the game is constantly balancing tension and control, vulnerability and power. And that balance keeps the pacing strong from beginning to end. Most of the game's spooky or unsettling parts are told from Grace's perspective. Her section is meant to be played in first person, which amplifies the horror. In contrast, Leon's perspective is meant to be played in third person, which leans more into the action-driven perspective. You can change either should you prefer a different perspective from either side of gameplay. This was one of my favorite parts of the game. Switching in between the two changes the pacing and the tone, and also how you approach whatever situation you may be in. Grace's sections felt different emotionally. The acting was phenomenal throughout this game, but the sections with Grace, I felt for her. There were a few parts where I almost cried. Leon's section brought the classic Resident Evil intensity that, oh my god, I have to fight all of those zombies? But also, we all know that Leon's been around since RE2, so he's such a badass now with all of his experience. So it felt like, yes, bring it, zombies! But I feel like this helped the experience to be dynamic. Instead of feeling like one really long run, it felt layered, which helps you with immersion on both sides. And the visuals elevate that even further. The lighting, the textures, the environmental detail, everything feels intentional. Shadows fall naturally, surfaces have weight. Even small touches, like the way hair moves or how light reacts off wet floors, add to the sense of realism. This isn't just, wow, that's a pretty screenshot type of beautiful. It pulls you in. The world feels lived in, like you're moving through real spaces instead of progressing through designed levels. There were moments when the detail, especially with the blood and gore, was almost uncomfortable in the best way. It doesn't glamorize it, and it doesn't exaggerate it. It feels grounded, which makes it hit harder. Nothing feels artificial. No awkward animations, no visual distractions. Everything blends together seamlessly. Speaking of fear, the story of this game, if you really think about everything that happens, it would be unbelievable to have to live through it. In any RE game, not just this one. But this game had a great story that tied into previous games almost seamlessly. If you know the whole RE story, or have played all, if not most of the other games, this added new things and then tied it all together in a perfect little bow. It wasn't just good for Resident Evil, it was strong. Some twists made me pause and think, or say, what? More than once. Moments I genuinely did not see coming. It didn't feel predictable or like it was just copying older games. It felt new and fresh. I feel like that's hard to do in a franchise that has been around as long as Resident Evil has. I also like the either intentional or unintentional ties to other horror works like Darkness Falls. Maybe it was just me seeing the similarities, but it felt so much spookier and more unsettling. So, what makes Requiem stand out other than it just being that good? It's polished, it's confident in its storytelling, it knows what it wants to be and is, and it shows. This game stands out because of its incredible mechanics, a genuinely strong story, beautiful visuals, a dual perspective that works so well, and a flawless launch experience, at least for me. This is survival horror done right. So, does Resident Evil Requiem stand up to Sakane's blood seal of approval? Hell yes. I'd give it a 10 out of 10 blood seal of approval from the goddess of horror herself. It's immersive, polished, and emotionally engaging. If this is the direction the franchise is going, color me excited. If you guys have played Resident Evil Requiem, let me know. Which perspective did you prefer, Grace or Leon? Did the twists hit you as much as they hit me, or did you see them coming? If you enjoyed this review and you want more horror game reviews, urban legend shorts, and deep dive breakdowns, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Remember, dare to climb, but don't be afraid to fall, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.